Welcome back, everyone. Tim Addict, still. Any questions from the first part? I should have asked people to think about questions before. If you have a question at any point, just stick your hand up, and I'll work that into whatever I'm going to say. So don't be shy about that. Anything you don't understand, anything you can't reconcile, anything which seems at odds with the book, just let me know. So one of the questions people had, as I said at the beginning of the last session, was about the slogans. Because the slogans we've got now, I had to look this up on the website just to see exactly what the real slogans are, because there are lots of unofficial slogans, like "get a job" was one, but that's not an official slogan. Not a bad one though. But the 6 official ones, I think, are "one day at a time," "easy does it," "first things first," "keep it simple," "think, think, think," and "but for the grace of God." I think those are your main ones. Now, I'm, as you probably gathered, a bit of a big book man. I like the big book. Why? Because it's the most useful thing I found. I floundered for a long time in recovery until I basically said, I'm just going to do what it says in the book and see if that works. And it did. And so that's what I do. Now, the danger is becoming such a purist with the big book that anything which is not in the big book, you flick off the table. So, we don't need any of that. And occasionally, people say, well, the word sponsor isn't in the book. Well, of course, the substance of sponsorship is all through the book. Just because you don't use the same word doesn't mean the thing isn't there. And in fact, Bill Wilson, who wrote most of the basic text, referred to Roland and Ebby as people who sponsored him. I think I'm right in saying that. Even though neither of them, I think, got permanently sober, both of them had struggles with alcohol after they carried the message to Bill. So it's a good example. It doesn't have to be literally in the book to be part of what they did. Now, the other thing, there's this sort of approach sometimes in recovery of the further back you go, the more authentic and pure it is. And the further we get away from the roots, the more watered down and wishy-washy and polluted it is with other things, with the idea that there was this great sort of good old days. And if only we can get back there, we'll all be all right. And one of the things people quote is the foreword to the 2nd edition, where it quotes some success statistics. And it says of those who, I won't say exactly what it says for a reason, but the statistics are these: of those who came to AA, 50% got sober straight away, another 25% got sober after some slips, and the other quarter showed improvement. Now, I don't know what improvement is going to look like. If you're not getting permanently sober and you're not even getting temporarily sober, what do you mean improvement? Anyway, people say, well, the statistics from this intergroup office show da 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 da. And it's statistically, it's a pile of horse shit. Because when you go back and read the statistics, what it says is, of those who came to AA and really tried, and you go, oh, so their population that they're measuring this against is not every person that came through the door. It's of those who really tried. Now, I remember Maureen said to me 30-odd years ago, she's never seen anyone really try and fail. So I think we've got much better success rates now than they did in the early days. I don't want to go back there when people would really try and only have a 50% chance of getting it. I'd rather be what we have now, where we've got such a rock-solid system. If people will only submit to the system, they're cushy forever, and that's the end of it. Much more reliable. Part of the reason why it's more reliable is all of the stuff which is around the edges of the programme itself, which are there to support it. So all of the fellowship stuff, the huge network of people, all of the tapes, the recordings, the written materials, the fact you can go to meetings anywhere in the world, the experience on the traditions, the experience on the concepts. All of these different things are there to support and fill in the gaps left in the programme itself. And I would not have got through my first year in recovery if it wasn't for an awful lot of common sense delivered without much beating around the bush by people who are in their 50s and 60s and 70s who said, oh, for fuck's sake, and put me right on a few things. The programme is great, but it really helps to have all of the other stuff as well. And I think the slogans are a huge part of that. So I'll just say what I get out of these. One day at a time. Sometimes I read the news and I'm fine. Other times I read the news and I'm not fine. Because I've just about dealt with all of the other 47 things going on. And then another one comes in with some doom-laden prophecy, and I'm like, you know what? I've had enough now. I can cope with everything. You want me to deal with this little prophecy on top of everything else, you can keep it. And I can't even, I just have to shut the app down. And even today, that happened. I read something, I thought, keep it. And then I went to a morning meeting, and someone said something about keeping it in the day. I went, oh, okay, so I'm fine today. That's all I need to know. I'm fine today. One day at a time. Easy does it. Now, sometimes the way that gets read is don't do anything. And I think I've said this, I've certainly heard other people say it, which is why I recognise it. You know, when people say, I haven't been to any meetings and I haven't done any of my step work and I've been gambling and I've been doing all sorts of other things, but it's progress, not perfection. And you're like, pumpkin, that's not progress, that's backsliding. So not being perfect doesn't mean you have license to just do whatever you want and then slide it under the heading of progress, not perfection. So easy does it. That they have to add on to it, but do it. If you read where that first got used in AA, what it meant was don't be such a jerk with other people. Leave them alone and be a bit more tolerant with people. So just be a bit kinder than you think you strictly need to be with other people. And I think with the phone, sometimes you can be a bit rough with people on the phone. Then you see them in person, you realise they're a lot more vulnerable than you thought they were. You see the actual kind of quivering person in front of you and you're like, shit, I was off on the phone earlier, because you misread how strong people are. So easy does it is to give people space, don't push things, stop trying to have your own way with everything. And that will make for a happy marriage. A friend of mine says about marriage, the two roles you're playing are housekeeper and companion. So just do all the housework even though no one's asked you to, even though it's not your turn. Just have them think the magic elves have come into the room and done it and wonder who did it. And then secondly, if people want your company, you give them your company. It's not your time until no one needs you. And I found those to be incredibly useful. Those are the two reasons I'm still married after 20 years. Apart from my other half's forbearance, I think that's the real reason we're still married. First things first, a friend of mine would say this is like the typical reaction of the addict. The house is on fire and the cat needs feeding. I'm going to feed the cat first and then we'll get to the house fire in a moment. I don't know about anyone else. I sometimes get asked to sponsor people. And because I've been around for a while, I don't necessarily know more, I've just been here longer. I often get people who've been around for 10 or 15 or 20 years or longer asking me to sponsor them. And almost every single one says, I really need to do a deep dive. I need to have a proper deep experience in my relationship with God. And my heart sinks at this point, because I'm not a psychologist, and I don't care. I don't care about weird dark stuff inside people, including myself. I'm not interested in it. I have a list which I made for myself of a bunch of things which, if I sort them out, make my life just a lot easier to run. So having my diet sorted out, having my sleeping patterns sorted out, having my relationship with devices sorting out, having regular exercise, eating food with people every week, making sure I remember families' birthdays and Christmas presents, having my finances in order, not spending more than I earn, keeping proper financial records, going and seeing a dental hygienist twice a year, getting my eyes checked, having all of the other little screenings you're supposed to have when you're over 50. 1,000 little things, making sure I don't go to bed with an unresolved difficulty. There are so many little things which are on the surface for me to deal with. I don't need to go looking for trouble. There's enough to deal with. If I ever get to my ideal weight, whatever that is, I might do some deep psychological stuff. But my relationship with food is complicated still. So how about I deal with that? And when I deal with those things, everything else sorts itself out. So dealing with loads of really practical, basic, obvious things without looking for psychological doodahs. And I've discovered that the psychological stuff seems to wash itself out of the system when I get my relationship with God right, when I get my relationship with other people right. I can go back to the town I grew up in and look in the estate agent windows and genuinely think maybe I could buy somewhere here. And I hated that place. So it's sorted out. I didn't sort it out, it sorted itself out by dealing with the things which are obvious. People talk about the unconscious, but that's not something which is buried. That's something which is really obvious to everyone else in your life, but you're just not aware of. Subconscious is a different thing. The unconscious, it's all of your fucking behaviour that everyone is really clear on except you. Do you know what I mean? That if you want to do some real work, ask your friends what you're really like. And you'll get, well, obviously this is really getting through to at least one person. Someone's going to have some inventory to do tonight. But you get the point. You don't have to go looking for trouble. The basic stuff is enough. Keep it simple. I'm going to come to that with the sponsorships. I keep the sponsorship really, really simple. But with the inventory, I'll give you a really good example. Do you have a book to hand? Thank you. So, does anyone do a nightly review? Yeah, so page 86, where it says, when we retire at night, we constructively review our day. Were we resentful, selfish, dishonest, or afraid? Now, does anyone write down anything at this point? Okay, some of you write things down. And do you write down the thing that you're resentful about? Some people do. Yeah. But this is maybe you're ahead of this, but this is a very common thing that people will write down the thing they're resentful about, write down the thing that they're frightened of, write down the thing that we're selfish about, maybe send it to someone. If you read what it actually says, it's a different question. Were we resentful? That admits two answers, yes or no. And now I'm looking for where it's asking me to go into detail. No, it just goes on to the next topic. It doesn't care what I was resentful about, so I don't need to. The problem is the fact I'm resentful. It's not about the content. It's about me permitting the resentment. When I'm frightened, I'm tempted to analyse the fear and talk about the fear, The problem is I'm letting myself believe my fear thoughts as opposed to simply saying, God's going to look after this, let's watch how that's going to happen. So see what I mean about simplicity? I've known people that spend half an hour to 40 minutes writing every evening and then sending it to people. I used to do it. That's not keeping it simple. Yes, no, to were we resentful. That's simple. And I can handle that. When it's simple, I can handle it. That's the best decorated big book I've seen in a very long time, so you get 8 points for that. Now, think is a slogan that you have on, sometimes you can order these little slogans and you put them on the wall, and one of them is think, and they turn it upside down. When I was new, people would say, you can't be too stupid to get the programme, but you can be too clever. And I sort of know what they mean. A friend of mine said he knew a friend who was very clever, and he was so clever, he used to clever himself into doing really dumb stuff. And I understand that as well. But I don't think the ability to think things through is a problem. The problem I have is thinking I know more than I really do, thinking I'm cleverer than I actually am, trusting my own views when I have no basis for trusting my views. One of my favourite insults in the English language is this, and I never deploy this because you get punched in the face, but you're not half as stupid as you make out, or half as clever as you think you are. So the problem is not thinking, it's arrogance. My problem is trusting myself over other people's manifestly better sense and wisdom and experience. So it's not to do with, there's nothing wrong with intelligence, there's nothing wrong with thinking things through, it's how one's doing it. And one thing that I've been guilty of over the years is not wanting to think anything through myself, but I simply phone someone else, I vomit out the situation to them in a sort of breathless, pathetic way, and then I get them to solve the situation for me and tell me what to do, and then I go around saying, my sponsor said to me, and then I do it, and then it goes wrong, and then I get a new sponsor, because clearly, now the truth is, I only told half the story to the sponsor, or I distorted it on the way, or I didn't listen back, or I didn't... I can't outsource responsibility in that way. But what I've had to learn to do, you can know the programme backwards, but never know how to apply it. And so my job when I've got a problem really is to think it through. There's nothing wrong with thinking it through, because you're going to be thinking about it anyway, so you might as well be thinking about it using the programme as opposed to just rattling away in your own insanity. And a really simple way of thinking things through is just open the big book at any page and say, is there a principle here I can apply to this situation? And you open it up and it says, it is useless to argue, it'll only make the impasse worse. And so you think, well, I better not mention that thing about the central heating to my other half, it'll only set him off. The problem is not knowing the programme. People know the programme. They've heard it enough. It's not applying it. And the only way to learn how to do it, unfortunately, is not to outsource it to other people, but to learn how to do it yourself and get it wrong a lot. And be willing to, of course, listen to people and ask, but not to outsource things to other people. Even into my 40s, I was treating myself like an infant that I had to have a grown-up think things through for them. And the fact is, this is the best thing to do if you've got sponsees that want to put the problem on your plate. You say, if you had a newcomer who had this problem, what would you say to them? And they're usually 8/10 of the way there. There's a bit of tidying up round the edges, but they're usually 8/10 of the way there. So your job is to empower the person to think things through and apply the programme, not to do it for them, which is one of the pitfalls of sponsorship. And then, but for the grace of God, and I know this is the case in Birmingham, it's certainly the case in London, that the recovery world was very haphazard for a long time, and then there were these so-called pockets of enthusiasm that started to build up, and people started to use the big book to recover rather than just the sort of general folklore of meetings. And it's very possible to think that you've got the good gear and everyone else is a bit dim for not seeing it. I've certainly gone through that phase, and being in a group that feels itself a little bit superior to the groups around, and to recognise if I know anything, it's only because I've been shown it by other people, and that's the grace of God working in my life. So I'm not higher or better because I happen to have learnt something. The merit isn't mine. I've just been able to receive. And why was I able to receive? Because I was fucked. That's why I was able to receive. So I can't stand on a soapbox and say, oh, look at me with because I can't take credit for anything. Does that make sense? It's all been given to me by other people. I haven't generated everything I'm saying, literally everything I'm saying, I've learnt from someone. I've just got a good memory. That's all. It's just passing it all on through. Before we go on to the sponsorship, any questions? Some places they're full of questions, other places there are no questions. Go on.
Just thinking, I'm interested in this, whoever said how does one become unrecovered, that's just a genius question right there. And you talked about trauma and that being separate, but what about when you experience some very real trauma like you described, like war or something like this, and it then becomes painful to connect with your higher power?
That's a good question. With bad things happening, well, you've got a couple of things. There's bad things happening and then things in the world affecting your relationship with your higher power. Those are two very separate questions. So with bad things happening, unfortunately, the answer is deceptively simple. Page 120 of the big book, it says, place the problem with everything else into God's hands. And I had a situation a couple of years ago where my best friend, another very close friend, the sponsor I was closest to, my mother, my sister, and my aunt, who are my three closest living relatives, all died in the space of a few months. And obviously I wish it hadn't happened, and certain things I wish they hadn't happened the way they had happened. But there was lots of emotion, but I was fine, because as soon as things happened or were on the horizon, I was like, God, you're going to need to help me with this. And you just get shown day by day what to do. The problem with traumatic events is when it's not the event itself, it's the narratives I build on top of them, which become my pattern for reacting to things. And I think so much of the program is about recognizing the thoughts that I'm having and how the emotion is a little bit like the lights on the dashboard of the car. So the emotion tells you what's going on inside the car. The dashboard lights tell you what's going on inside the car. The emotion tells you what's going on inside you. What is going on is thinking. The bit that you're aware of is the feeling, but behind every feeling is a thought. And so when it talks about growing in understanding and effectiveness on page 85 of the big book, I think that's a lot of what it's talking about. So on page 84, it says, we continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. Now, to be watching, I've got to be outside my own thoughts, sitting there in my little armchair, looking at my mind, looking at my physical brain pumping out rubbish, and looking at how my mind is dealing with it. And what's become really clear from watching my own mind is, I heard this a long time ago, my mind is a closed economic system. One half manufactures bullshit and the other half buys it. The problem is not the manufacture of the bullshit. That's just going to happen. The problem, I'm far too quick to believe my own negative thinking. I'm far too quick. I default to doom, apprehension, and attack in response to anything. happened this afternoon. I got an aggravating little message from the office I work in, and thank God I replied politely, because it turned out to be fine. They were accommodating with something and they needn't have been, so it was fine. But my God, the rage that rose up in me, and I had to stand back from that. It lasted about 15 seconds. I thought, woof, that's like a hit of something. To look at that and say, isn't it funny how much I read into a small comment? How I make such a little go such a very long way. The danger when really bad stuff happens is that my mind says, well, this is a really bad thing, so go for it. You have license to make this go wherever you want it to go. Does that make sense? So the danger when bad things happen is to just say, right, we're in for it now. I'm going, my best friend died. Oh, well, I've got a couple of years off of working No. I had to treat that like everything else. Now, with the relationship with God, with things getting in between me and the relationship with God, we mentioned theology earlier, what your beliefs are about what God is and what your relationship with God is. And I think that needs to be sorted out. If things in the world are getting in the way of the relationship with God, there's usually, in my experience, some mistaken ideas about God's role with the physical universe and people's behaviour. The belief that it's one of the oldest theological questions in existence. If God is good and all-powerful, why do bad things happen in the world? And that's a very common trigger when bad things happen and it gets in the way of relationships with God. I've seen that happen a lot. And that needs to be investigated, unfortunately. And there are lots of good books on the subject. C.S. Lewis is very good on it. Rabbi Harold Kushner. Alice Thomas Ellis wrote a book on the book of Job, which is very good. There are lots of people who've written about this because you're not the first person to have that problem. The other reason that I can get angry with God is because I haven't got my own way, and it's not fair. I heard a rabbi, it's not strictly a recovery thing, but shoot me afterwards. Just let me eat my curry first and then shoot me. But a rabbi was visiting a woman in Buenos Aires, or he was visiting a community in Buenos Aires. And the person who picked him up from the airport was a woman whose son had died, I think, in a motorcycle accident at the age of 18. She was furious with God and couldn't get past it. And it had happened a while previously. And she said, so, how am I supposed to handle that? And the rabbi reports, he says, I don't know where this came from, but he had a little conversation with her and said, if you were God, thinking about who to send this soul down to the planet for 18 years, and he chose you, if you had had the choice, would you have turned that opportunity down and said, you're only going to give him to me for 18 years, you can keep him? She said, no, I would have been glad to have him for 18 years. And it completely changed her perception of the situation. The right person says the right thing in the right situation, your picture turns upside down. So there's almost always, when I've got a problem with God, I've got a problem with my understanding of why there is bad stuff in the world. And that's too big a question to cover here. Or it's simply, I want my own way. I'd made some assumptions about what life was going to look like. This friend of mine who died, me and my other half and this friend, we always joked about how we're going to be in this old people's home together in 40 years' time in the Alps. And it's not going to happen because there are only two of us now. And there's one thing mourning a person who's died, and there's another thing mourning the future you thought you were going to have with them. Those are two different things. When someone is ripped from you, there's a very bizarre period of adjustment where your relationship with them continues, but it has to be in a different form. That's very different than letting go of your vision of your own future you were going to have. So there's a way through it. You just need people who've been through that kind of thing to help you work through it. Does that make sense? Chris, did you have a question?
Yes, Tim. Chris Alcoholic. While there's people here, I just wondered, you'd said when people go up service, when the time is gone, it's the same old people do service in AA, whether it's treasury, secretaries, GSRs or whatever. I just wondered if CA, do you have that problem in CA? Do you have probably new people doing service? Because it hasn't changed, since in 12 years since I've been, in the fellowship, and it's the same old boys and girls who we rely on, including me, to keep doing the service. Now, whether that's a sponsorship problem, where they're not, getting those sponsors through, so, you've got it, one of the three things is service recovery, blah, 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 and it's such an important part of this programme. You said earlier on, Tim, you already feel part of, and we have to give everything away, it's cost us nothing, doesn't it, but people really miss out when they don't do service. It's a very, very important part for me of this road of sobriety. Just wonder what your thoughts would.
So I think it's a problem in all fellowships of people not doing service. But while I say it's a problem, I think it's a design feature of the world of recovery. One of the traps that a person can get into, and I did this with a home group, is there were me and a few other people that knew what we were doing and were reasonably competent, and when we were involved, things worked well, and when we stood back, things got fucked up. And they really did. So you wearily go back in, you sort things out again, you put all the toys away, you pick up all the Lego off the floor, you wipe the jam off the walls or whatever it is. Like, you sort stuff out, and then you think, okay, we're good for a bit now. My home group, I don't even attend the business meetings anymore, because what I noticed, even when I didn't have a role of secretary treasurer or GSR or something, if there was a big decision, you could see the eyes go to the people who are the longest sober people in the room just to see what their faces are doing. I can be a good actor if I need to be, but not everyone is able to do that. People will read whatever you allow to leak out, and you can be exerting an influence without even saying anything. And the horrible lesson I've had to learn is you have to leave the children to do it, and they'll mess it up, and then they'll work it out, and then they'll be as good as anyone. But the only way people learn is by doing it and messing it up and seeing what flows from messing it. It's the only way I've ever learned anything. So one has to step back and leave things undone. Keep a little bit of an eye. And most of what I do now with service is helping other people do service rather than actually doing it myself. You know that thing in a lot of families where there's one person that just walks into the room, sees the chaos, says, oh, for heaven's sake, I leave you for 5 minutes with all of this and look at the chaos. I might as well do it myself. And then they do everything themselves and become the martyr, grumbling, muttering to themselves. Don't be that person. If you leave a space for long enough, eventually it gets filled. And then maybe try something over there, try something different. But there's nothing worse than trying to keep control of something just because you're frightened of what will happen if you let go of it. And eventually people learn. People are really good in my home group now. It's really impressive the way they handle things. It's very, very smooth. And it's because people stood back from it. Any other questions?
Yeah. So, I don't know if you could call this a slogan. I'm going to call it a slogan. So, quite often here in meetings, keep coming back, yeah?
Yeah.
I don't like that slogan because people only come back until they don't come back. I think that we should be telling people to stay and become convinced on page 60. What do you think?
I think you can do both. You can... The thing is, with anyone in the room, it's not a single bunch of people who all need the same message at the same time. There are people who've been softened up enough by the experience of trying to live sober without the programme that they're really ready to do the work. There are a lot of people. It took me. I did very traditional AA for the first 15 years of my recovery. I got a really big book after that, but it took 15 years before I got a really big book. So it needed a long time to soften me up. So there are going to be people in the room that need to be told to stay. There are going to be people in the room that need to be told to do the work. There are people that are just so hesitant about the whole thing and don't feel they belong and are unsure. And they're the ones you need to tell them to keep coming back. So I think it's a matter of tailoring the message to the person that's in front of you. And here's the thing. There isn't a rule for what I say to anyone on any given occasion. It's just a matter of saying to God, give me the right thing to say right now, and hope that it's more likely to be right than wrong if your intention is sincere. So I think you don't have to choose between two things. You can usually do both. Any other questions? On the sponsorship business, now there are lots of different ways of sponsoring, and I've sponsored in lots of different ways. I'm going to tell you how I do it now, and I'm happier with the whole sponsorship deal than I ever have been before. It's really smooth, it's really cordial, I don't fall out with people, and almost no one drops out of the process, which is weird. This is last couple of years, a few people, turns out they're not interested in the big book brand, whatever. I used to get really up in sponsees business and think about what I'd say to them next time I got them on the phone. Watching in meetings, just paying attention, and that needed to stop. What I do now is really simple. I have an hour and a half slot in the morning where the phone is available to do step work. I actually don't meet sponsees physically. If they're in London, where I live, I get them to come to my home group, and then I see them then. We have a chat and they come for fellowship with the whole gang. But the reason I don't have face-to-face meetings scheduled is people are really keen when they make the plan. But by the time the day rolls around and the appointment, it's time for the appointment, they're not in the same mental or emotional space that they were when they made the appointment. They don't want to be there. This is why 2/3 of those meetings would get cancelled or dicked around. A couple of days ago, I tried to schedule a call with someone, and it was 20 minutes of dickage back and forth before we sorted it out. I thought, my God, if every phone call I had to have with people had this rigmarole around it, with this like dance of desire, how much do you really want to speak to me? How much are you willing to sacrifice in order to have the conversation with me, both of us doing it? It's just awful. So, it's much simpler now. Phone goes on at 8 o'clock or so, and I've got until 9:30. Fastest finger gets through. We do whatever. Well, they dial. The quickest one to dial gets through. It's just like the doctors. It's perfect. People call at 8:05, forget it. They're like 6th in the queue now. If the others are quick and we get through, we might get to you. But it's really interesting. The ones that call at 8 o'clock on the dot, it's because they really want to speak to you. And so every single conversation I have with a sponsee is a conversation with someone that had the desire to speak the moment they called. They're much more open that way. No scheduling. Forget it. And then if people have crises or have like sudden questions, they can call any time. But for step work, for book work, for formal check-in, like weekly check-ins or whatever, it has to be in those slots. I've got different slots for different people in different time zones, but I sponsor people in different countries. So the Americans come online at a certain point, and Australians are a bit more complicated. But basically, that's the slot. And when I'm at work after that, I'm at work. I'm not I can answer a text, I can take a quick emergency call, but we're not going to have We're not going to have a call about the book. And what we do, what I give people first of all, is all the basics of the programme so they can get through the day. In other words, all the stuff on pages 84 to 88 of the big book, which is how to get through the day. It takes you from the moment you wake up in the morning till the moment you go to sleep at night. And there is nothing advanced about this. People say the steps are in an order for a reason, but the reason is not because steps 10 and 11 are supposed to be delayed for months or years until you get there. It's simply you've got to put them in a list, so that's what the list was. In early AA, when they designed the programme, they launched people immediately into steps 10, 11 and 12. And they discovered that there was I tried looking for the story, but I couldn't find it. There was a chap who was young and struggling with not drinking. And they thought, we're going to leave him out of the 12-step calls because he's just struggling with his own stuff and he's younger and he doesn't have the experience. He's not going to look credible to people. It was only when they started taking him on 12-step calls and making him do some work that he stopped relapsing. So I give people a package deal of 10 and 11, pages 84 to 88. I show them how to get rid of resentment, which is the passage on 67 of taking a different view and various other things. How to get rid of fear, page 68. How to solve problems with the sane and sound ideal on page 69. How to get on with people, which is 98 to 99. I'll come back to that in a minute. And how to deal with disagreement or dispute, which is 117 to 118. I deal with those. Now they have breathing space. They've got a method for getting through the day. And then we go back to the beginning. We just read the book all the way through. So in CA, CMA, AA, we read every word. With Al-Anon, we do go through those chapters. I get them to do self-study on the step 1 stuff. Then we have some conversations about it because it takes too long. But with the AAs, the CAs and the CMAs, every word of the book from the beginning of the preface to 164, we go through one way or another, certainly until the end of step 11. People who are good readers, after that, you can just leave them to read things, come back with questions. Other people who don't normally read day to day, the only book they ever read is the big book, you kind of want to go through word for word to make sure it's going in, because it's not their bag. So we go through the book, and the funny thing is, when you spend all your time going through the book and you front-loaded it with solutions, they don't seem to have many problems. So you're not firefighting anymore because they've got a solution, so there's no firefighting. What I do, and this is really important with people who are... is there any CMA in Birmingham?
What's CMA?
Well, that's the answer then. Crystal Meth Anonymous.
Okay.
So with Crystal, it's so difficult to put together a few weeks or a few months, and the combination. You see, this is why it's the program, but it's other things around. So what we'll talk about is I'll get the person to say all of the dark, weird stuff going on in their head that they want to keep to themselves. And then we'll reframe that the way an adult would look at those situations, which is not difficult. For me, it's not difficult. For them, it's difficult. But we want to make sure that they're not holding anything inside. I get them to start talking to God every day. I get them to form a little group of friends, just find some people to run around with and go to meetings and find some people to help. And that, plus the program proper, the nuts and bolts of the program, seems to work pretty well. So I go through the steps in the big book. We explain what's in the book. When they get to step 4, whenever they write something, whatever they've written in the last 24 hours, they read it out. We go through it. We make sure it basically is an answer to the question. So let's say the question was, where was I self-seeking? We make sure the answer is a genuine answer to that. They've understood it. Where was I to blame? Same thing. Step 8, very difficult. You'd think it would be straightforward, but it's not. To get down on paper, exactly what did you do? Why was it wrong? Who did it affect and how? Because often there are lots of psychological narratives about what I thought was going on was this, and this is what I thought was going on in their mind, and that's why I did. We don't find out what they did, we just found out what they were feeling. So you need to work a lot on that. And I'd say 70-80% of the time with sponsees on the phone is spent going through the book. Maybe another 15-20% is step 4 and step 8, reading out and discussing things, and about 2% is everything else. And it used to be the other way around, getting distracted onto all sorts of other topics. If you deal with the programme and have them reliant on a whole fellowship of people rather than just you, then they're just kind of happier. They don't have all this stuff that they're trying to offload on you. Now, I think there are validly really different ways of sponsoring. Go on.
Jan Alcoholic, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
When I work with my sponsees and we get to step 4, I know their story because it's come out and the trust is there. But when we're doing step 4, I don't want to hear it all again. They know what they've done. I just want them to answer the questions specifically and look at, because they know what's happened, they know the shit, but now they're looking specifically at those questions to address. Because I can't be sitting around for 3 weeks listening to all the stories about every person that they've harmed. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is that being a bit lazy?
No. Okay, so when they do the step 4, first of all, I get them to do a list of all the people that hack them off in any way. Now, the list can be like 600 people. We're not going to be analysing 600 people. When you go to the doctors and they do a blood test, they do a blood test on 5 millilitres of your blood. They don't take 3 litres of your blood and they don't have to drain you of blood and test all of it. But a small sample is enough to work out what's going on inside the person. So I'll get them to pick the corkers, and when we work on the second column, they have to tell the story in order to make sure that what they're nailing is the exact thing the person did that pissed them off in 5 words or less. Yeah. Now, I've heard the story at that point. When we get to page 67, which is the real inventory questions, we've got the resentment out of the way. The first question is mistakes. And I use that to say, where am I looking at this wrong? And we reframe that situation. After that, there's no more discussion. Stuff needs to be said once, but no more than that. And then it's a matter of keeping the inventory to just what's there. And what I get people to do is to group things. So if they've had 47 colleagues, if they're looking at self-seeking and selfish and frightened, just look at the whole category of colleagues, because it's going to be the same thing again and again and again. You don't get any marks for repetition. You don't learn any more by saying it twice. So I get people to group things as soon as they start to repeat. And then you don't have to listen to 12 hours of stuff all in one go. You've been listening to it along the way. And then you're doing it in 10-minute doses, and then you can stand that. Otherwise, you end up dreading the step 5, and they know that you're dreading the step 5, and that's a bad experience for them. So basically, with sponsorship, after trying so many different things over the years, I've been reduced to simply reading the fucking book with them, and that's it. When we get to an action, we take the action, and there's a bit of chit-chat around the side. And as a result of that, my relationships with my sponsees are pretty cordial now, and they did not used to be. So, and I think we're nosing 8 o'clock, so I think that's probably the end of me.
Yeah,